Hi there. My name is D.G. Valdron. This is my attic, and these are my books. I'm a writer. So my most recent book is Star Lost Unauthorized. I've got dark fantasy, light fantasy, alternate history, you name it, I'm writing it. But today, because I'm a lawyer in my spare time, we're going to talk contracts. Now, this is part of a series of videos that I've done. You should go back, watch the two previous videos. This one, we're going to talk about royalties. Now, in the previous video, I talked about copyright and licenses, and essentially what you are going to be giving a publisher. Here, in royalties, we talk about what you get from the publisher, which is hopefully money. Now, two things. There are royalties and then there are advances. An advance is not they're paying you for the book. An advance is that they are paying you for the books that they hope to sell. So if you get like a $500 advance or a $5,000 advance, what the publisher has done is they've sat down and they've said, okay, we can probably sell 1,000 units of this book, or 1,000 copies, or 10,000 copies, and therefore we will earn so much money, and your royalties would have been X, Y, Z. So we're going to pay you X and Y and Z up front because we expect to get our money back eventually. So that's an advance, and once the advance is paid, you will not get any more money until your book has, quote unquote, earned out its royalties. Okay, earned out its advance. Once the advance is repaid from the sales and the royalties that you would have been paid, then you'll start getting checks. Now, used to be they'd just hand you a giant pile of money. Nowadays, as I understand publishing, they kind of break it up into stages. So, for instance, they will give you a certain advance when you sign the contract, a further advance when the book is delivered to them, and then a final advance when the book is actually published and in the bookstores. So they're kind of like spacing it out. And there are other ways to space it out based on delivery targets, on the editing process, and so forth. So you will probably not get your entire advance all at once. Keep that in mind if you're dealing with, Revenue Canada or whoever. Okay, now let's get to the royalties, which is, the key part of what you're dealing with or what you're doing. A royalty is basically your commission on every copy that is sold. So if your royalty is, say, 10% on paperbacks, and they are selling your paperback novel for like $20 a pop, you should be getting a royalty of $2 per book. And through the course of the book's sales life, you should be getting paid fairly regularly. Now, you will not get paid like on a weekly basis. What will happen is that the contract should say that you will get paid royalties on a quarterly basis. And you should be getting a statement from the publisher saying how many copies we've sold, or if we've sold any copies at all in this quarter, or in this year, or partial year, whatever. The contract should stipulate how often they pay royalties, and they should also stipulate that you should be getting a statement that records sales. So once you have that, then, the money comes in, you cash the checks, hopefully, and you're happy as a clam. There are some wrinkles with royalties. First of all, different types of publishing or printing, different types of licenses or for copies will produce a different royalty. So the royalty you get for an ebook is different from the royalty you get for a print book or publishing or a printed copy. And this makes kind of a bit of sense after all, because it's two different marketplaces, and the production, the printing, all the industrial costs, the warehousing for an ebook is completely different. Ebooks are often cheaper. Your royalties should be higher. The royalties for such things as a regular trade paperback and a hardcover may be different. There are different kinds of marketing. So, for instance, if your book is being marketed through a book club, the royalty rate for a book club may be different than for a regular bookstore. Look for these sorts of things in your contract. The royalty rate for an audiobook will be different. Okay, and then if we're talking the exotic forms of licensing, the royalty rates or the payoffs will be different in each case. So if you're looking at modern contracts, modern publishing contracts, what you are going to find is there's a whole laundry list of different royalty rates for different situations. Okay, some of these will be negotiable. Most of them will not be negotiable. The royalty rates for a paperback are generally pretty standard, for instance. And this is because the industry is pretty standard. If you're getting something into a bookstore, the bookstore needs its 40% to make a profit. If you were actually printing a book, you need to pay the printer for all the paper, all the ink, all the printing presses and stuff like that. You're going to have to warehouse your book before you get it. You have to ship it. All of these things are built-in costs. So when you are talking about royalty rates, they are generally pretty standard along each category. If you are a really big name, you can maybe negotiate, but mostly it's going to be pretty standard. Now, one thing with royalties, the thing that I am going to emphasize for you that is really important to have is that you got to have your reports. Don't just rely on a check. You need to see on a regular basis, at least once a year, but my preference would be ask for it on a quarterly basis. You want to see a financial statement for what your books are doing. Specifically, you want to know how many sales and what kind of sales. So if your book sold 100 copies of an ebook and 10 copies of a print book and 3 copies of a hardcover and 5 copies of an audiobook, you want a statement to that effect. If you are not getting this information, you cannot tell whether or not you are getting paid. You cannot tell whether or not your royalties are accurate. You cannot tell whether what you are getting is what you deserve. And frankly, there was a case involving a literary agency whose bookkeeper just stole literally millions of dollars. So you want this information. I mean, there were writers who were just ripped off blind. If you're dealing with small presses, then you definitely want this information. It is the basic mark of professionalism. Okay? So this is the world of royalties, and it's not really that complicated. And this is what you need. You want statements. If you are not getting statements, then I think you really need to have a conversation with your publisher. And you may need to terminate or call in the dogs.